Morning. Let's talk about something else as well today, and we talk about, as I say, we'll never shy away from the big issues of the day, and a lot of headlines this morning focusing on the body Ofsted to do with schools. And we're going to start by chatting about the tragic case of the head teacher, Ruth Perry. She died 11 months ago after taking her own life after her school was downgraded from outstanding to inadequate following an Ofsted inspection in November 2022. The downgrading was due to safeguarding concerns and not teaching, and the school has since had its rating changed to good. Yesterday, a coroner concluded Mrs. Perry's death was a result of suicide, contributed by an Ofsted inspection. It is the first time an Ofsted inspection has been listed as a contributing factor in the death of a head teacher. This was the thoughts of Ruth's sister, Julia Waters, after the verdict had been given.
Ruth was a head teacher and also a wife, a mother, a daughter, a sister, and a dear friend to so many people. She died 11 months ago tomorrow. Her death has left an unfillable hole in all our lives. Today, the coroner's conclusions validate what our family has known all along, that Ruth took her own life as the direct result of the process, outcome, and consequences of an Ofsted inspection of the school she led and loved, Caversham Primary. The inquest into Ruth's death has shown the brutal inhumanity of the system of Ofsted inspections. Ofsted likes to judge people with single-word labels. We could judge the current Ofsted system with our own labels: callous, perverse, inhumane. Ruth's death and this inquest have laid bare the imbalance of power that exists in our education system. Schools and teachers should be accountable to the families and communities they serve. Ruth, of all people, understood this. She was let down by an Ofsted system beset with glaring gaps, inconsistencies, and blind spots, yet held the power to destroy her career and put an end to her school as she knew it. There are now urgent lessons that must be learnt from Ruth's death.
That's Ruth's sister, Julia Waters, after the verdict had been given. So this time last year, Ruth Perry, just like any other head teacher, was going to run her school. As a result of her being informed that the school was going from downgraded from outstanding to inadequate, so from top to bottom in the Ofsted chart, the coroner yesterday concluded that that Ofsted inspection was a contributing factor in the death of her. I'd be interested to hear from you today, as parents and grandparents. We probably all check to see what one-word review has been given by Ofsted to judge that school. But is the system fair? Is it right that that school can be branded by just that one word? Does that tell the whole picture? Is Ofsted cruel in how it conducts itself? Do you care about the rating of the school your child or grandchild go to? I know from calls we've taken in the past that there are former teachers, maybe current teachers, and we've all been parents, or a lot of us have. So what are your views on the way we grade our schools? Is it time for change? Do you think actually, we need to have a measure of where a school is at? You can't just throw our children into these schools without any kind of regulation. There must be some form of checks and balances in place to judge how well a school is doing against others, shouldn't there? Or should there? If your child or grandchild is visibly learning and seems to be happy, does a school need a rating? What happened in the past? Let's go back 60s, 70s. I mean, when you went to school, was there a rating? Did your dad say, "Well, you're not going to that school"? We just went, didn't we? Where we just went to whichever school was nearest. I'd be interested in your thoughts. Have a listen to my next conversation. 0800 111 40 41. This is the county's phone in, so tell me what you think. Joe Askew worked as a teacher in schools for 25 years. Now runs Connexus Tuition in Colchester. Hi to you, Joe.
Hello, Ben.
Hi. Let's start with, what do you make then of this ruling and this case? First off.
It's tragic. Obviously, the case, the ruling that Ofsted contributed to Ruth's death. I'm not surprised, but obviously very saddened. But I totally agree that the process needs to change significantly. I think that the system is what is wrong, and I think the Ofsted framework needs to be looked at, and as you say, these 4 words that can judge a school, there's an awful lot that goes on behind it. Schools all the time are trying to improve. They've got school improvement plans in place. They work with trust leaders or with local authorities to ensure that they're focused on the important areas like the children's well-being, their learning, safeguarding, etc. So, yes, I think that big changes need to be made.
We'll get to what changes you would like, Joe, but obviously you worked as a teacher in schools for 25 years. So can I ask what it's like when Ofsted come and the whole, the day or the 2 days that they're with you, and then the wait, and then you get the grade? What is all of that like being in?
It's very stressful. I think because we're working to a framework and you're judged in over that time, and there's a snapshot really that Ofsted get. Lots of people obviously are interviewed. It's very data driven. You need to have lots of evidence, and there's it's the outcome. You're always very worried about the outcome and the effect that might have on the community. It's not just the 2 days, because it so much weight is put onto this one judgment. Then schools often are working can be years, just towards the Ofsted, what they might be, what the outcomes might be, mock Ofsted inspections, etc. And so, those 2 days are very stressful, but there's a huge focus on the process throughout.
Were you ever at a school that received a grade that you weren't happy with, and unsatisfactory, or?
I have done. I mean, I've worked
like?
in various capacities in schools, and I would say one a long time ago when Ofsted used to come in actually for a week, and you'd get a lot more notice. But that actually again meant that you'd be working, focusing on them when they came in. Everything was about the Ofsted process, but I would say more recently I've been involved in a different capacity in a school that had that, and that was. That was devastating, really, for the community. As the parents, the governors, the teachers, the head teachers, again, because the focus focus was on safeguarding, which is very, very important. But what that has done is to change the whole school. The school have had they've now had to join an academy. An academy order was put on them, and the school has changed. Everything now is focused on the judgment and the outcomes of Ofsted, which means that the ethos of the school is slightly different. So, because it's had to be, because it was judged as inadequate, and that was, So
that one rating led to a massive change
A huge change. Yeah, a huge change in leadership. And the school was, the original grading was outstanding. So this was a long time ago, though.
What do you think needs to change, Jo? You hinted earlier you felt, the one-word system isn't really fair and something needs to change. What is that? Because on the flip side, Jo, we do know as parents we need to have some kind of way of judging how good a school is, don't we? So what is the answer?
I totally agree. Yeah. I mean, and speaking as a parent, I would agree as well. And it's very important to know and to be able to work with schools. I think that having I suppose that the answer is to work with schools. So Ofsted should be working with schools through the whole process, bearing in mind that all schools are judged against exactly the same framework, and there will be very different schools in very different areas with very different demographics. But if they worked together, there's a school improvement plan in place, as I said, and various partners and constantly working on that. And then Ofsted came in, made judgments, but I think the framework needs changing, and then there would be an outcome, and that outcome schools were supported to ensure that they could work on improve the areas that were that they were told weren't up to scratch, and I think that's important. This snapshot I don't think works. This judgment, the language in the judgment, as a parent, you would be very concerned if a school that you were considering sending your children to was deemed as inadequate. But when you actually read a report, there's a lot of good stuff that goes on and a lot of good learning. And sometimes the areas that need to change can be changed quite quickly.
So are you saying let's remove the one word, here's your report, and leave it at that?
Yeah, or change the wording even. But I think more than that, I think what are we actually measuring? I think the whole framework needs to be looked at. The well-being and of students, how do we collect our evidence? The whole process, I think, needs to change. How are schools and leaders supported in actually working towards that framework? Is there more of a supportive partnership there? I think
the problem is, Jo, sorry to come in. The problem with it, Jo, sorry to come in, but
yeah, of course.
With the one word, it gives everyone a simple this school is doing well, it's not doing quite so well, and then people can to give them it's doing well here and not. It doesn't make it as clear, does it? And there's less clarity and more confusion potentially.
Should the word be inadequate? So it's that word. Should the word be inadequate? I think I would ask the question, but also. Maybe does there need to be a word? Could there be a short summary written? So I just think the whole system, the framework, for example, how schools are measured against the framework as well, is that the framework there isn't necessarily what schools should be wholly focusing on. So
it's interesting, isn't it, Jo? Do you think Ofsted?
It is interesting. Yeah.
Do you think Ofsted can continue? Should they be scrapped?
I think people would be uncomfortable because, as you say, what's going to take the place of Ofsted? I do think in its current form that certainly needs to change. I know a lot of people would call for Ofsted to be scrapped. I'm not sure personally, because I think people would want something in place and people would want to know where that accountability is. But certainly in its current form, I would say yes.
So and you'd have something else.
Yeah, something else in place. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, but something but I do think something where I guess something that parents in the community want to be able to that's important, isn't it, that they know that there's a measurement and that schools are accountable, and schools are, and for schools to work towards for something I suppose something that's achievable. And when I say achievable, I don't mean that schools can't achieve, they can't be good, they can't be excellent and outstanding, but what makes an outstanding school and where is the focus? So for that reason, I would say the framework needs looking at and changing. And then the whole Ofsted inspection process, the way that is conducted, but to have an Ofsted, some form of accountability, and maybe with those judgments using words, yes, you could have. But it's quite a big change, isn't it, I'm talking about now. So,
Jo, thanks for your contribution, Jo. Really good to chat to you, really good to draw on your experiences of 25 years as a teacher in schools, rather you than me. Thank you for joining us from Connexus Tuition in Colchester. Speaking after the case, Ofsted Chief Inspector Amanda Schmielman apologised for the distress that Mrs Perry undoubtedly experienced as a result of our inspection. She said, Ruth Perry's death was a tragedy that deeply affected many people. My thoughts remain with her, her family, her school community and everyone else who knew and loved her. She said Ofsted was making several changes to help reduce the pressure felt by school leaders. She said, as a first step, inspections will be delayed by a day next week. She added, we have started to develop training for all inspectors on recognising and responding to visible signs of anxiety. Interesting starter for a conversation, that chat with Jo, wasn't it? And I wonder what conclusions you are drawing, where your mind is going when it comes to grading our schools. Feel free to brainstorm. We all, as parents and grandparents, we surely want some kind of way of knowing how the school and the teachers and the head teacher and everything in together is performing in comparison to others in the area, don't we? But how do we do that? Is the way it's done now, is that fair? You might think, actually, you know what? It's fine, it's simple. It's one word. If a school is inadequate, it's going to have a little bit of attention on it, and hopefully it'll pick up. You may think, actually, if a school gets outstanding, they might be resting on their laurels. Oh, we're outstanding for 3 years. It's fine. Do you think it's a fair way? If you've been a teacher or you've worked in the education sector, what do you think? WhatsApp 08000 321 333. Start your message with the word Essex. Is it league tables? Do we go back to that where your school is 95th out of 300 in the borough or whatever? Over to you. Let's have a discussion about this. 0800 111 4041 is the number to call. Keep getting in touch. A number of interesting topics as ever to talk about today. Really interesting, if you've just joined the programme, we had a discussion about whether Ofsted is a fair way of grading schools today. Quite a big one for Friday, but a lot of news focus on Ofsted, because yesterday the coroner in the death of Ruth Perry, who was a head teacher who took her own life after her school was downgraded from outstanding to inadequate at the beginning of this year, the coroner concluded that her death was, or the Ofsted inspection was, a contributing factor in her death, and it is the first time that's ever happened. Her family felt, as a result, her sister, very heartfelt after the coroner's verdict, saying, this is a sign that something needs to change. And I'm putting it to you this morning that if there does need to be a change, what should that change be? On the one side, you've got a system that is grading schools, and the impact of a school that isn't performing quite as well as it should once that grade comes in, has on the staff and the pupils and the parents connected to that school. But on the other side, we've got this need and desire, and perhaps right, as parents and grandparents, to know that when we send our children through the gates of the school, that they are being educated how we would want them to be educated, and they are being very well looked after, and they're enjoying themselves. So in the middle somewhere is potentially a system that that means that schools aren't under too much pressure for targets, but we are confident that our children are learning in a positive environment. In there somewhere is the answer, perhaps. What that answer is open to discussion, and feel free to get in touch, and particularly keen if you were in the education system, not just as a pupil, we all were, but I mean, as a teacher or a carer or a helper or anything like that, the TA. What was it like in that Ofsted environment? 0800 111 40 41. Is it fair, or should it be scrapped and replaced with something else? Joe, who'd worked in the schools for 25 years, saying, do you know what? No, just one word is unfair, and perhaps it is time for a change and something else. Your thoughts welcome on that. Text 81333. Start your message with the word Essex.